Continuing with the last part of the workshop, we are very pleased to have Professor David Lagnado. He's a professor of cognitive and decision sciences in the Department of Experimental Psychology at University College London. Professor Lagnado has written over 100 articles, co-authored a textbook on the psychology of decision-making, and has a book on evidential reasoning titled Explaining the Evidence, How the Mind Investigates the World. His fields of research include neurosciences, legal systems, and causal reasoning and decision-making. And the title of the work that he is going to present today is Scales of Injustice, Why a Balanced Metaphor Can Be Misleading When Weighing Evidence. Professor, it's your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been such a pleasure. Oh, the mic's here. Okay. Oh. I can speak louder. Oh, that's okay. This is good. This is good. Sorry for standing up. That's pretty good. That would be fine. I think that's fine. I'm quite loud. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah. Is this okay? I think this is fine. I kind of like to move around. Thank you very much for inviting me. Great pleasure. Really enjoyed the conference. And I realized that this might be a little bit different because I'm a psychologist, but I do dabble in legal issues, and hopefully you find it interesting. But if not, a bit of light entertainment. And Christian has seen some of the ideas here, so he can have a snooze. I won't be offended if you snooze. Don't snore too loudly. Okay, brilliant. And so I'm trying to kind of like, this is work that I've done for a year or so, and I'm trying to kind of like broaden it out because I feel I'd like to kind of like engage a bit more with the legal community about it. So I'd really invite, like questions or whatever. Okay. So we're going to start with a few examples. Triplets. Actually, this is a case that someone just told me about a few months ago, and I really like this case, so I'll give it to you. So this is an English case, and there were three identical brothers were convicted of selling a submachine gun. And then there was an appeal, but this is and there was DNA found on the machine gun which matched the triplet DNA. Okay. And the random match probability, for people who like that kind of thing, was 1 in a billion. Okay. So, so it matched, and they assumed it was only one person who had handled the gun. Okay. Right. There was some other evidence. So they were convicted, and this evidence was part of the trial. And then the appeal argued that the DNA should not have been admitted. That was the basis of the appeal. And this is actually when the KC who told me about the case asked me what I thought of the case. And I wasn't involved in the case. I sent him an email with a BaseNet. And anyway, I wasn't involved. But this is what this is the defense lawyer maintains. This was in the court judgment, so it's just taken verbatim. Defense lawyer maintains that where the evidence could not be attributed to any one of the appellants, the matter was left, in effect, up in the air. She says that there was a lack of specificity in the evidence in that no individual one of the three appellants could be identified by reference to the DNA evidence. And then there was lots of long arguments, which I won't bore you with. Okay. So just a question, were the court right to include the DNA evidence? That's a question to you. Oh, I can look at that as well. Oh, I quite like to have a shared, this is like a shared, together we're looking at this together. Whereas if I look at that and you look at that, there's a disconnect. I'm kind of partly joking, but I'm really sorry if I end up looking at that. I can't, it's a habit of a lifetime. I'm really sorry. Okay, right, okay, so case one. Case two, an older case. The trials of Barry George. So he was convicted of murdering Jill Dando, and it was a very famous case in the UK because she was a celebrity, and it took a year before they actually found this guy, and he lived nearby. He was a loner, etc., etc. And basically there was no evidence against him, until, well, she was shot with a single bullet until they basically did a search of his house, and they found a coat, and inside the pocket of the coat, they found one particle of gunshot residue. And that matched some of the gunshot residue found in Giordano's hair. Okay? That was the kind of, up to that point, they didn't have good evidence, now they did. And there were some other circumstantial evidence. Okay. So the elements matched, the gunshot residue evidence played a significant role in the trial, by all accounts, and the defense argued that it could have arisen through contamination, okay, or through some other process by which the police also had, when they searched the flat, they all had firearms. Also, you can see now, when they put the coat, they put it on a mannequin, a police mannequin, which could have had gunshot residue. Okay, so there's lots of possibilities. The defense argued it could have come from contamination. The prosecution argued that the probability of getting the gunshot residue, given these alternatives, was very low. Okay? He was convicted of murder. Okay, so the story continues. Then some forensic experts, some of whom I think me and Christian know actually, thought about the case in a bit more detail. They went back through the case, and they thought, okay, so they argued that actually, in the trial, they just presented the probability of the gunshot residue if he's innocent, okay, and said it was very low. But they didn't present the probability of the gunshot residue if he's guilty, okay, to get a likelihood ratio. And they argued that that also was very low, okay. And they actually put numbers on it, 1 in 100, okay. So they argued that the probabilities of that gunshot residue, given that he shot the gun, 1 in 100, given that it was contamination, 1 in 100, therefore the likelihood ratio is 1, therefore this evidence shouldn't be admitted. Okay. So they put that in the appeal. This was like the second appeal or third appeal, I can't remember. And the judge accepted this argument. Okay. So there was a retrial. The gunshot residue was not admissible. And to be honest, there was no other evidence really, so he was found not guilty. Okay, question for you. Were the court right to exclude the gunshot residue evidence? Okay. I can see a few people shaking their heads, which is, I like to see that. Okay, final puzzle. This is based on a real IRA case, but I've kind of just made it a little bit simpler, basically. But it's something that we can go through. So Anne is suspected of having handled explosives. Okay. And there's a test, the Grice test. It's a real test. I don't think they use it now, but it was used to see if you've got nitroglycerine on your hands, which is indicative of handling explosives. Okay. And this bit I'm kind of making up just to make it, to probability of testing positive if you handle explosives is 90%. Okay? But the test can give a positive result even if you do other things, certain other things, and the probability of testing positive if you've been handling playing cards is also 90%. I'm not actually making this up. This is based on the real case, but okay. Right, so Anne claims she was playing cards shortly before the test. Okay. Anne tests positive. Right. Does the positive test give any support to the claim that Anne has handled explosives? That's a question to you. And you can say yes, no, or I can't tell. I mean, sometimes, okay, can we have a show of hands? Who goes for yes? Who goes for no? By the way, don't look at Christian. Who goes for no? No, okay. Who goes for can't tell? Everyone loves can't tell. Okay, everyone loves can't tell. I think actually can't tell is, you have to really argue hard for can't tell, to be honest. Okay. Okay. Right. I'm going to come back to those problems, because I think that they're all symptomatic of a deeper issue, which I think, and I just recently thought that the balance of evidence metaphor is actually, I think, what underlies these problems and the correct solution. Okay, here we are, balance. Okay, let's say there's a defense case and a prosecution case, and then it's very natural to think that the evidence that comes in will tilt the balance one way or the other. Okay. And so you have some evidence for the prosecution, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And a natural assumption, I think, with this balance metaphor is that evidence is zero-sum. Okay, that's a very natural assumption to make. Okay. And what do I mean by this? It means that if evidence raises the belief on one side, it should lower the belief on the other side. And more interestingly, if evidence is equally explained by both sides, it should not change our belief. Okay. I think those are quite natural assumptions to make. But you can those assumptions only hold if the alternatives are exclusive and exhaustive. Okay. And exclusive, you're probably all familiar, but we can be quite precise. Exclusive, if one alternative is true, if the other is false, one of the alternatives presented is true. Okay. But in real-world inquiries, I say they really are. And yeah, I mean, in mathematical problems, you can make sure. And a lot of, let's say, Bayesian or probabilistic approaches are based from the mathematics you can make sure. In the messy real world, you really can be sure that your alternatives are exhaustive. And often they're not actually exclusive. Okay. So you can see where I'm going. So let's just go through the examples. So we can go back to, start with the Grice test. It's quite simple. Yeah, this is where you have the explosives and the playing cards. Note that they're neither exclusive nor exhaustive. You could do both, you could have been doing both, you could have been doing neither. Okay, both might be true or neither. But, and I would say under assumptions which I think you all would agree with, and we can maybe come back to that, I'll try and, the positive test raises the probability of both. Okay. And most people said, I can't tell. So I would say that irrespective of your priors, and irrespective of your likelihoods, as long as there's a very weak constraint, you should be raising the probability of both. So you can tell, and it is positive evidence. Okay. But what's interesting is that the evidence doesn't discriminate explosives from playing cards, but it does discriminate explosives from not explosives. And that's what you want to know. Okay. That's the key point here, really. Okay, so that's the Grice test. What's next? Oh, yeah, so the answer, I think, it is probative. Okay. How much is an interesting question, and I think that we could, that's an interesting thing. Okay, Barry George case. We annoyed a lot of people with this analysis. If you're interested, we have an article and then a rebuttal, and then we rebut the rebuttal. Yeah, if you want to the nitty-gritty. But anyways, I think that the Barry George case is the same kind of case. So the court, he could have shot the gun, and there could have been police contamination. Okay, so they're not exclusive and they're not exhaustive. There might be some other reason for the thing. Okay, blah blah blah. But and again, the argument is it raises the probability of both alternatives, but it raises the key point is it raises the probability that Barry George did it versus he didn't do it, and that's what you're interested in. By the way, I don't think Barry George was guilty. I think they were wrong to exclude the evidence. I don't think they were, even with this evidence, I don't think he should have been found guilty. So, okay. Right, Barry George. And between the triplets is a tiny bit different, but I like that case so much I had to put it in. The triplets, right. So it's an interesting question whether you assume they're you assume they're exclusive. Clearly they're not exhaustive, but interesting question whether you think it was one or it could have been more than one. We can deal with both, it's not a problem. But it's important. It could make a difference to your modelling, so it's really important to be clear. Okay. So what's nice about this example is we need to add in the other. If you don't add in the other, to be honest, if you don't add in the other, you're at a third probability anyway, without the DNA evidence, But so in that sense, if your prior is a third for each of them, the DNA is not going to change. But that's the wrong way of thinking about it. You presumably your prior should be much lower, and So the DNA doesn't discriminate between the three, but it does raise the probability up to a third, and that's a massive increase from 1 in whatever you want to choose as your prior. It's a massive increase. And so this is, I think, quite a neat way of just showing how that evidence definitely should be admitted. And what was interesting is in the court appeal, the defense lawyer has a lot of, I think, quite confusing arguments, but then the judges also have confusing arguments. It's all kind of like a slight web of confusion, and I do think that, personally, I think that this BayesNet just clarifies things a bit. It's not AI, because you need a person to put the numbers in and to interpret it. It's a tool. Okay. So now that's the kind of like more theoretical part. Now I'm going to speculate a little bit about the psychology of it. And not just speculate, I'm going to give you some empirical tests, psychology tests of, what typical people do. Okay. So, and I found this nice quote from John Stuart Mill just to get us, in the human mind, one-sidedness has always been the rule and many-sidedness the exception. Hence, even in revolutions of opinion, one part of the truth usually sets while the other rises. Okay, it's very nice. And there have been some, there was some work on this by some social psychologists in the 70s and 80s, where they were talking about when you have alternative causes of some behavior. They actually talked about when you have external factors and internal factors. And the idea was that they felt that people tend to treat causes as hydraulic. And this is the same thing as like the balance of evidence idea. So you assume that if one increases, the other must decrease. And also, and this is the bit I kind of add in, is that assume that if evidence equally predicts things, then there's no change. That's the kind of key assumption. Okay. And I've kind of termed it, treat evidence as zero sum. Okay. So now I'm just going to tell you about some experiments, what do lay people think about this? And actually, to be honest, I have done this on some experts as well, but I haven't extensively tested legal people. Do people make the same error? So yeah, I give them scenarios very similar to the one I told you, across a range of, they could be legal cases, it could be a medical case, it could be an investigative intelligence case. So we've done a range of cases. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the key point is, both hypotheses could be true or neither. And so I've done two approaches. One is purely qualitative. Okay. So getting away from this issue of wherever priors, just getting away from that. And it's purely qualitative. People just say it provides some evidence. It doesn't provide any evidence. I can't tell, like I asked you. And then I've also done a set of more quantitative things. Okay. So, and this is lots of studies now. We've tested probably more than 2,000 people using different scenarios. And this is just an indication of the kind of, test results. So take this as the case like the explosives case, but it's across many cases. And this is just like the frequency of people's judgments between yes, no, and can't tell. And it's basically randomly between the three. Okay? I mean, it's 38%, very close to 33%. Okay. So an interesting thing is that we don't just ask them about the positive case, we also ask them about the negative case. So if the test turns out negative, does that change your beliefs in the hypothesis? And there, people say, yeah, of course, it's negative. So that's giving me evidence that the hypothesis is not true. And we thought maybe this is a way to get people to think the other way around. So it's like, you should maybe, if you can do it right in the negative case, does that help you do it in the positive case? It didn't really help. But if you think about it, if a test can disconfirm, it should also be able to confirm. Okay. But anyway, the problem persisted. Okay, so this is the qualitative stuff. I'm going to just now talk very briefly about the quantitative stuff. Okay, so here's the so here we gave people indicative priors, and we tried it in different ways. We said something like, well, so far the police have got a bit of a case against Anne, and they think it's like a 50-50 case, and that kind of thing. Or similarly, like with the other priors. So let's say you have priors of 50-50, for example. And then you can also give or vary the conditional probabilities. So now this is looking a little bit more like a probabilistic problem. Okay. And then this is a study actually I did last week, so I'm quite excited to present these results. So we varied the conditional probabilities here. So 90-90 means that positive test is 90% with explosives and it's 90% with playing cards. 90-50, 50-90, 50-50. Okay, so we're varying the conditional probabilities. And I've computed the posterior probabilities that you should have, okay, based on a few assumptions, but you know, the point is that they all go higher than the prior. So in all these conditions, you should be rating both things higher. Okay. What do people do? Okay, so this is the frequency of people just not changing from their prior. So, I mean, in the 50-50 condition, you know, 90% are not changing. It goes down a bit in the 50-90 and the 90-50, and there's reasons for that. Okay, so this is just people who just don't change from the prior. Yeah, especially in the 50-50, 90-90. Now, these are the total, this is the percentage of people who get their probabilities to sum to 100. Okay, so it's pretty high. Okay, I would say it's pretty high. Majority commit this zero-something. Okay, so the point is that even if you do correctly raise the probability of explosives, you then incorrectly lower the probability of playing cards. And you shouldn't be doing that. You should be raising both. But it just feels so unnatural to raise both. Okay. And this is just if you want more fancy plots. These are violin plots. So these are individual. You can't see it. Oh, no. This is a fundamental flaw in my plan. Oh, you can't see it. Okay, never mind. There's nothing I can do. Basically, these should be showing you, and they would be showing you, not on here, lots of little dots, and with dots connected to show whether people go up, whether people go down. I'm very sad that maybe a handout would have been better. Okay. Anyway, imagine, if you like, there's lots of nice kind of like I've joined in the two, you know, whether people went up, stayed the same. So sorry, yes, this is not so nice now, but basically in the 50-50 condition, very few people, most people stayed the same. In this 90-50 condition, this was the only case where you had improvement. Okay, people went up. But they might have gone up for the kind of wrong reasons. Okay, they went up because explosives is more likely to predict the test result than playing cards. That's why they went up. So it's not quite for the right reason. And as I said, they went up for explosives, they went down for playing cards. And in this case, in the 50-90, they were all over the place. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I will. If you're interested, I can send you a proper graph. But anyway. Okay. Summary. I think a pretty robust zero-sum effect for quantitative inferences. And other studies we've done have shown that people make these judgments with quite high confidence. Also, when you have a lower prior, people do go up. They go up to 50-50 and then they stop. So it's almost like 50-50, you know, once they don't, so we found that for a lower prior. So there still seems to be this zero-something. But it's not like people will never increase their probabilities. But when they do, they decrease the probability of the alternative. Okay, and we have tried to explicitly instruct people, but that hasn't made much difference, actually. We tell people, look, both causes could be true, neither might be true. That hasn't made much difference. Maybe a little bit of difference. Okay, and we haven't tested on judges or legal experts yet. But I think it actually, personally, I think it reflects a relatively deep-set reasoning kind of shortcut. Because when you have alternatives and you kind of want to discriminate between them, it's quite natural to think that they're in this kind of like hydraulic setup. But I think that is wrong, and it can sometimes be dangerous. Okay. How much time have I? Oh, I'm doing okay.
10 minutes. 10
minutes.
10,
Okay,
12
great,
minutes.
great. Okay, we can go to the next part of my talk. I would have talked a bit more about this, but how do you avoid it? Take care, formulate your hypothesis carefully, think hard about exclusivity and being exhaustive, recognize that evidence noise, blah, blah, blah. These are just recommendations. Bayes nets can help you, I think. They definitely can help you. Again, as a thinking tool, not as an AI that makes the decisions for you, but as a thinking tool to help you. It's like that, the triplets case, I think, would have been a useful thinking tool for the judges because they had pages and pages of very confused reasoning. Okay. A project with Christian and Ruth where we are trying to think about how we can maybe use Bayes nets. But I'm going to skip now to, I thought I'd add this in because I think it's also about zero-sum, but I really like this case that I'm looking at now about deception. So it is part of the same general story, but I'm kind of slipping it in because I like it as well. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a non-legal case. I always think that reasoning examples, they're great in legal cases, but I think it's really important for me to try them out in where you don't have maybe the baggage of legal concerns, because you can get really sidetracked on those and you can ignore sometimes the core reasoning. So here's an everyday case where you're going to buy a car, you're going to buy a second-hand car, just for illustration, I'm going to give you priors, but we're going to lose those priors very quickly. Half the cars are good, half the cars are bad. Keep life simple. You have salesmen. Half are reliable, half are unreliable. Okay. What does it mean to be reliable? We need to be more precise. A reliable salesman, in this case, he'll tell you correctly. If a car's good, he'll say it's good. If it's bad, he'll say it's bad. An unreliable seller, he'll tell you the car's good, irrespective of whether the car's good or not. Okay. Right. You look at the car, and the salesman says, it's a good car. Okay. Now, what's the probability the car's good? Okay. Now, I'm not going to test you, but maybe a show of, okay, so just who thinks, so let's say we agree that it starts off with 50-50, okay, half the car's good, 50-50. Who thinks, after this information, the probability of the car being good goes up? Who thinks it stays the same? Who thinks it goes down? I love you. I love you. Okay, next question. What's the probability the seller is reliable? Okay, now, it started off as 50-50. There's a 50-50 chance you get a reliable guy, 50% chance you get an unreliable guy. Now, has the probability gone up? Has it stayed the same? Or has it gone down? I did it a little bit quickly here because I don't. Okay. Okay, so think on those points. Okay, so look, this is a non-trivial problem. Why is it non-trivial? I think it's because you've got two unknowns. Okay, you don't know whether the car's good or bad. You don't know whether the salesman. I mean, this is life. You don't know either of those things. There's two unknowns. So you're having to try and evaluate the evidence under two very different, not more than two actually, different steps. Also, another complication is that there are different possible deceptive strategies of the salesman. Okay, and I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but it could be. I'm going to differentiate between a selective versus a non-selective. Selective. This salesman's selective. He's not. If a car's good, he's not going to lie. He's going to lie if it's bad. Okay, he's selective. A non-selective deceiver would say the opposite to what's true. Okay. So they would be saying a good car's bad. Not a good strategy for that case, but sometimes a good strategy. So it's not always, you have to think about what's the strategy. I've actually given you the strategy. Okay, so let's use a Bayes net, a really simple Bayes net, where the report is a function of the hypothesis and also the reliability. There's two kind of, if you like, causes, if you like, which you need to take into account if you're going to determine the report. Okay. And this is, in a way, the Bayes net approach sets up a kind of generative model. This is a generative model. Okay. It tells you that these hypotheses, depending on their states, will generate a report. So it's a generative model in that sense. Okay, so we're going to tailor this to the car salesman. Quality, good or bad, nice and easy. Reliability, reliable, unreliable. We can make it more complicated, but I think it's important to keep it simple to get the key points. And okay, so what do we assume about the strategy? I told you the strategy, and just so you can see that there's no magic, we just put this in a base net in the table. This is the table for report. Okay, and you don't necessarily need to go into all the details, but there's basically 4 states of the world. Reliable and the car's good, reliable and the car's bad, unreliable and the car's good, unreliable and the car's bad. Okay, I've kept it simple. And basically, the reliable person will say it's good if it's good, bad if it's bad, but unreliable will always say it's good. We could make this more probabilistic, but for now, the deterministic case is hard enough. Okay. So that's the table. Now we can use the tool to see what the correct Bayesian inference is. So your priors, I made them 50-50. The seller says it's good. The quality goes up to 2/3 from 0.5, but the reliability of the salesman goes down to 1/3. Okay, which I think, well, I definitely thought at first, it feels counterintuitive. Simultaneously, the report is increasing your belief in what he's telling you about, but decreasing your belief in his reliability. Feels a little bit puzzling? Okay, but not only is it true, I think, but it holds for any priors. It doesn't matter what your priors are. Okay, so here's where another thing where when people say, but where do the priors come from? I don't care where the priors come from, because as long as you have a prior that's not 0 or 1, this result holds. Okay, so and just to give you an intuition, informal intuition, thanks to Chris. Actually, I was giving this talk once to some people who hate probability, and I was slightly struggling to explain it to them. And Christian, I've slightly borrowed this from Christian, and now I've proved this. So this is a proof now. So the report good is more likely if the car is good versus bad, if you marginalize over reliability. Sorry, I'm not going to go into the details, but that's basically a mathematical thing that you just marginalize over the possible states of reliability. Easier to understand, actually. The report is good is more likely if the salesman is not credible than credible, marginalizing over quality. That's quite easy to understand here, because we know that an unreliable salesman is always going to say good, whereas a reliable salesman will only say good if the car's good. Okay. Right, so what do people do? I think I'll be very quick.
You have another 5 minutes.
Wow, that was a long 10 minutes. Okay, right. What do people do? Okay, I mean, I think you're probably going to be guessing this. So I did exactly what I did to you. You know, is car good? Is the salesman reliable? And again, I'm just going to show you so these are the qualitative results. Do you go up or down? And basically, to cut a long story short, if you look at when the report is good, most people say it stays the same. And I think a lot of you said it stays the same. In terms of equality, and in terms of the deception, this is like probably the reliability. Most people say that the reliability stays the same as well. Okay. Again, we've done this in quite a lot of different contexts. Right, why? So so this is where the zero-sum connection comes in. I think you can explain it in terms of zero-sum thinking. There's a few other things, I won't go into that, but let's just go to the zero-sum explanation. So there are 3 possibilities consistent with the evidence. Okay. So we started off with 4 states of the world, okay, and now we can see that 1 state of the world has been ruled out. Yeah? Reliable and bad car has been ruled out. So we've got 3 left. And incidentally, you can now compute 3 of those states of the world. In 2 of the 3, the car is good. That's why the probability of the car being good is 2/3. And in 2 of those 3, the salesman's unreliable. That's why the reliability goes down to 1/3. So this is, I think, quite a neat way of seeing that. Okay. Now, the idea is that maybe this is non-trivial. People need to simplify. And the idea is that they could simplify this using a bit of zero-sum thinking. And they assume that the good report is either a function of good car and reliable salesman or bad car, unreliable salesman. Okay. So they just assume, and they neglect the possibility that it's a good car and an unreliable salesman. So they neglect that possibility. Now, if you just think about those two, you're in a kind of zero-sum case, basically. Okay, and that's, I think, why people make the error. Okay, right. Last minute, so I intentionally did a car salesman scenario, and we tested that. But I had done lots of stuff in legal cases where, as you can imagine, the same issues can arise with witness testimony. I'm going to give you an example of one, but I'm quite confident now that this is a problem across. Again, we've looked at general population, so we haven't looked at legal experts, which I think would be really interesting. So this is just one example. There's a gang stabbing. Someone stabbed in a bar or outside a bar. Police arrested suspect. They interview people who were at the scene in the bar and stuff like that. One youth says he witnessed the stabbing. Okay. But it's possible he belongs to the gang. The suspect was part of the gang, so it's possible he's a gang member too. We don't know that. Okay. So suppose that the witness says that the suspect was not the stabber. What do we do with this information? You know, what's your belief that the suspect is stabbed, and what's your belief about the reliability? You know, okay. You've probably already worked out the answers now, but I'll go back. You know, I'll just go through it quickly. So you've got the same kind of base net. We've got the claim, whether the suspect stabbed the victim or not, and we've got the witness reliability. And you can make this more complicated. I'm trying to make it simple here and saying, look, if they're reliable, i.e. they're not a gang member, they're going to say, report the true value of the world. If they're a gang member, they're going to say he didn't stab him, whatever happened. Okay. But we can definitely complicate things, but I think this gets the logic, I think, tighter. Okay. Same table, pretty much the same table as before, blah, blah, blah. And also, same thing, whatever your prize, I didn't give you a prize, whatever your prize, you should, when the witness says no, you should raise the probability that he didn't stab him, but also raise the probability that this witness is part of a gang, he's basically unreliable. Okay. It feels crazy. Sometimes I still have to wonder whether this is right, but I think it is right. Okay. So what do people do in this case? Bunch of experiments, exactly like, you know, like I gave the case, and we get the priors on did the suspect stab the likelihood of the suspect being guilty, and also the prior on the reliability of the witness. And I think here, yeah, we've done different versions. Sometimes we just let people come up with their priors, and they report their priors. Other times we give them a bit of a hint. So we might say that 50% of the youths in the bar were gang members. We don't know which. But these are just hints, really. It's fine to do it with whatever priors people come up with. Okay. And yeah, so these are just the results. Again, this is one of many studies. So you can see here, this is the probability that the suspect's guilty, dependent on what the witness says. And here, slightly differently from the car salesman case, guilt ratings change in line with the witness report. Okay, so if he says, yes, it was him, people's judgments go up. If they say, no, it wasn't him, they go down. So far, so good. Okay? Fitting with the model, that's good. Okay. But this is a judgment about the reliability of the witness. Okay. And here, they go up irrespective of what he says. So if he says the guy didn't stab him, it goes up, and if he says he did stab him, it goes up. And this is contrary to our model, and also, I think, contrary to rational inference here. And it might be important, because it might be important if you then, let's say, questioning someone on further issues, deciding who, you know. So I think these have ramifications. I haven't necessarily gone into all the ramifications. Okay, so summary. As before, people don't fit the Bayesian network model, but they're slightly different pattern results. And it's very natural, I think, to raise the probability of what someone says, but also to raise your kind of trust in them at the same time. And that, I think, is a problem. We could maybe have a more sophisticated model, so I've kept it simple, and I'm very open to developing a more complicated model. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's almost finished now, so yeah, so basically, this natural assumption just doesn't seem to hold, and it's, again, I think, a zero-sum thinking that you assume that, in this case, it's slightly different, but I think it's still zero-sum. you assume that if you increase belief in my hypothesis, you should lower the belief that the witness is non-credible. So it's what I mean. So that I think is similar to a kind of zero-sum thinking. So the balance of evidence metaphor, just coming back. I was trying to think of how to, it's not always a bad thing, but I think that we have to just be really careful. And it's kind of, I think it's a very natural assumption, and it's not always, it doesn't always hold. Thank you for...